is crucial to the success or failure of the first 100 days of this presidency. It is not only liberal versus conservative, but a battle to define Trumpism, healthcare style. What does that look like? And define the marriage between this.
Everybody's got to be covered. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say, because a lot of times they say, no, the lower 25%, they can't afford private. But
universal health care.
I am going to take care of everybody. I don't care if it costs me votes or not. Everybody's going to be taken care of much better than they're taken care of now.
So you have that, and you have this.
This is it. If we don't get this through, the goal of repealing Obamacare and instituting a system that will be patient-centered is going to be unbelievably difficult. This is the vehicle to do that.
So here's the question. Is it the government or taxpayers' duty to make sure that everybody in this country has a health insurance policy? Obamacare said yes, but we've seen what happened. The costs have been driven out of control. Insurers have left, and the insured are paying thousands of dollars out of pocket before they even get to the deductible anywhere near anything that could be called coverage. You've got a lot of states that are down to one single provider, which is essentially providing no choice at all. So the GOP plan on the table says it will ultimately get us lower costs and more competition in the marketplace. But the most conservative or libertarian members say that the plan will not pass. They want to get the federal government out of the healthcare business, and they want to kick Medicaid grants back to the states and let them allocate the money. Here's their argument. Watch.
We didn't tell the voters we were going to repeal Obamacare, but keep a bunch of the taxes for an extra year and bring back the Cadillac tax. We didn't tell them we were going to repeal Obamacare, but take the Medicaid expansion and extend it for several years. And we didn't tell them we were going to provide insurance subsidies in the bill and have a 30% penalty, even though the mandate's gone.
There is no three-phase process. There is no three-step plan. That is just political talk. It's just politicians engaging in spin. There is not going to be phase 3 legislation. It's phase 1 and done.
So it is day 54 of the first 100. I'm Martha McCallum, and tonight we welcome Speaker Paul Ryan, the driving force behind this. Mr. Speaker, welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Martha, congratulations on the gig.
Good
to be with you.
Thank you. It's great to have you here tonight. So let's start with some of your colleagues on the Hill. You just heard the sound from Tom Cotton and Jim Jordan in the House. What's your answer to them?
Well, first of all, this is the replace plan that we all ran on. Remember, we've been saying for well over a year that we want to repeal and replace Obamacare. The president made it very forceful in his campaign, but also since the campaign, that we're going to repeal and replace at the same time. This is something we've all been saying we will do, because we want to replace Obamacare, which is a government-run program, with market competition, with patient-centered health care, where people get to do what they want to do, where they have real choice. And so we worked on this bill starting January of 2015, or January 2016, excuse me, and wrote this bill from January to June, released it to the country, ran on it all fall, and then transmitted it into legislative text. It is now passed with unanimous Republican votes out of 2 of our committees. We're in that 4-committee process. So it's going through what we call regular order on its way into law. And sure, there are people who have concerns or criticisms, but that's what happens when you get consensus. As a governing party, we have an obligation to keep our promises, to pass the reforms that we told people we would pass if we got this opportunity to be in the majority with the Republican Senate. So we're doing that.
You've got a lot of folks who are kicking and screaming, though. I want to pull up some of the headlines that were in the news today. Ryan constituents turn on Obamacare 2.0, they're calling it. They talk in one about Trump being ahead of Ryan in his own district. Does it feel like you're getting the squeeze to come up with a new plan, to start over, or to allow amendments to the plan that you came up with?
Well, no, not at all, because this is, again, the plan we ran on. But we want to give members feedback. This is a legislative process. Like I said, we're halfway through a 4-committee process. Then it goes over to the Senate. So we're keeping this bill intact, but we're obviously going to make some modifications per members' feedback. We want constructive engagement and feedback with our members, and that's exactly what's happening and going through the committee process. And then when the House passes it, it goes over to the Senate. So if senators have an issue, if senators have a problem, they have their own process to go with over there. So I would suggest senators should just amend the bill when it comes over there. This is the legislative process. But the point here, Martha, is We are repealing and replacing Obamacare with a plan that we've been running on all along, and we really
the argument
can see
from
that
some
this
of
is
your
going to work.
colleagues, Mr. Speaker, excuse me, is that it's not the plan that they feel they ran on. They feel, Jim Jordan, and you heard him in the introduction, says that there are too many taxes that are still in this plan, that he doesn't like the Medicaid expansion being drawn out, the Cadillac tax being drawn out. His argument is, we're basically still paying for everyone to be covered at a federal level, and that's not what he feels voters voted for in the fall.
Yeah, so the Medicaid expansion goes away in 3 years instead of 2 years, and that is just to allow the tax credits to catch up. That is a pretty minor modification. As far as the Cadillac tax, look, I want to repeal it fully and for forever. It's the Senate rules. Here's what people are concerned about or frustrated. We have to write this in such a way that it can't get filibustered, that it can pass with 51 votes in the Senate. And that means this legislation can't have everything we want in it. That's why we have a three-part process, which is Part 1, 51 votes, repeal and replace, which is this bill. Part 2, Tom Price deregulates the marketplace and lets the states go back to opening up market competition so the states regulate health care. That's a huge act of federalism.
There's a concern out there that those two parts are never going to happen because you're going to need 60 votes to get those through, and that you won't have them.
That's not true. Part 1 is 51 votes. Part 2, there's no votes. It's Tom Price does this with all the flexibility he has. Part 3 is what you were talking about, the Tom Cotton claim. Now, it's clear to me that Democrats aren't going to help us on a lot of things, like repealing Obamacare. That's why we're using reconciliation. But these bills that we're talking about in Part 3 were never in the bill that we passed last year or in 2015 because they can't because of reconciliation rules. I do think that Democrats would be pretty hard to be standing up against things like association health plans. Let a farmer buy their insurance through the National Farm Bureau Association plan. Let a restaurateur buy their insurance through the National Restaurant Association plan. I mean, I look forward to seeing Democrats try and kill that idea when we send that bill over to the Senate.
I just want to get your answer on one thing in terms of whether or not you're flexible about changing this bill on the House side, because Senator McConnell said today he's open to amendments on the Senate side. Now, when I listen to Jim Jordan, it makes you wonder if you're going to get, you can only lose 22 votes in the House. He's got 40 members in his Freedom Caucus. You may not get enough to pass this. Are you willing to make changes? Can you signal whether or not you're open to that today?
Oh, yeah, no. Just so you know, Martha, that's what we've been doing all week long. That's what we've been doing this entire process. Okay. So, of course, the Budget Committee takes this up on Thursday. So those discussions about what kind of modifications, those are ongoing discussions.
So you are open to change.
Of course we are. But more important, let me just get you there. So yes, we are, but we got to make sure we hit the sweet spot so we keep consensus and we got to get it done. We don't want to have some endless dragged out thing where we never get this done. It's been 7 years long. We got to make good on our promises. We got to make sure that we keep consensus so we actually pass this bill. Look, the Freedom Caucus members who already voted for this in the committees This bill is modeled after Tom Price's bill that he had introduced as recently as December, which had like a dozen Freedom Caucus members as a co-sponsor. So I feel like we're in a good place, but of course we want to listen to our members and make improvements to the bill so long as those improvements don't make the bill harder to pass.
So you spoke to the president today. He's got sort of Rand Paul on one side arguing for a different kind of bill. He has you, who he's spoken to quite a bit on this. What did he say to you today?
We basically just talked about how we're executing, how we're getting this done. We talked about dividing up labor, who does what, and how do we make sure we just basically stick the landing and get it done. And we were just talking about details about the kinds of changes we're looking at, details about just the legislative process, our timeline, our deadlines. It was basically just a status check. It was the second time I talked to him today. So we talk pretty darn often, almost every day.
Is he encouraging you to stay flexible with these more conservative members?
Well, we're all, it's not that we need that encouragement to stay flexible. Okay. We've been talking about these things. We've been working with our members about how can we make improvements to this bill without derailing the bill or without making it harder to pass the bill. But we've long been talking with our members about how to make improvements to the bill. But basically what we're working with the White House is making sure that everybody's on the same page. You have to remember this bill was written with the White House and the Senate all along, working off the same document, the same page. And so we just check in with each other on a very frequent basis, and this is what that was.
All right. I want to get your response to this audio that came out this morning. I'm sure you heard about it. I'm just going to play a little piece of it, and I want to give you a chance to respond to it. Let's play it.
I am not going to defend Donald Trump. Not now, not in the future. Look, you guys know I have real concerns with our nominee. I hope you appreciate that I'm doing what I think is best for you, the members, not what's best for me. And so I want to do
October 10th after that Access Hollywood tape came out during the course of the election. But, a lot of people are speculating that it may be being released today because people want to pressure you for other reasons on health care. What do you think?
I got really thick skin, Martha. This is ancient history. That was back then when like you said, when that video came out. Look, it's no secret Donald and I had our ups and downs. The president and I had our ups and downs during the campaign. But we merged forces at the end of the campaign. I campaigned with Mike Pence. I supported Donald Trump. We merged forces. And since then, we've been working hand in glove together. So, honestly, I got really thick skin. This is such an ancient history. I'm surprised it's even a story.
All right. So do you think people are trying to take you down, to put a chink in your armor during this health care battle? Is that what's going on here?
You know what? I don't even really give it much thought. It's just not part of my day job to worry about things like that, so I just don't worry about it.
All right. Speaker Paul Ryan, thank you so much. Good to have you here tonight, sir. All right. So straight ahead, Governor Mike Huckabee and former advisor to President Obama, Austin Goolsbee, react to Speaker.
We don't want to have some endless, dragged-out thing where we never get this done. It's been 7 years long. We got to make good on our promises. We got to make sure that we keep consensus so we actually pass this bill. But of course, we want to listen to our members and make improvements to the bill, so long as those improvements don't make the bill harder to pass.
This is looking like a heavy lift. That was Speaker of the House Paul Ryan just moments ago as I pressed him on how far he's willing to go. How many amendments would he be willing to bring in to win over the more conservative members of the House to back the proposed health care bill? A lot of what has been getting lost in this debate, what does this bill actually do? How does it change existing Obamacare law? And what exactly does the more conservative wing want? For that, we go to Trace Gallagher, live in our West Coast newsroom, who boils it down for you all tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hey, Martha, of the 5 biggest takeaways from the GOP health care plan, one of the most controversial appears to be the cuts to Medicaid. Now, for context, prior to the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid was intended for low-income families, pregnant women, children, the disabled, and the elderly. Since the Affordable Care Act went into effect, an additional 11 million people enrolled in Medicaid. The GOP plan would not affect those people at all or anyone else who enrolls prior to 2020. But after 2020, Medicaid expansion would be cut back, saving the federal government an estimated $880 billion by 2026 and leading to an estimated 14 million fewer people getting Medicaid coverage. For those who would no longer qualify for Medicaid, the hope is they'd be covered by alternate plans, though some governors, including GOP governors, worry about their states losing federal dollars. Also causing controversy is the Congressional Budget Office estimate that by 2026, an additional 24 million people would be uninsured, with 14 million of those becoming uninsured as early as next year. House Speaker Paul Ryan has downplayed the numbers, saying the reason more people won't have insurance is because they will no longer be mandated to have insurance. And the CBO agrees that not having a mandate certainly plays a part, but the CBO also says affordability plays a part. And just to be clear, the GOP bill eliminates tax penalties beginning in 2016. So if you didn't have individual insurance, or if you were supposed to offer your employees health insurance, but you didn't, you won't have to pay a fine for last year or future years. But some lawmakers, including Kentucky GOP Senator Rand Paul, say the Republican bill still has a mandate because there are still penalties. Listen to him.
There's also an individual mandate, believe it or not. Instead of paying the mandate to the government, they're going to tell you have to pay the mandate by law to an insurance company.
And because of the criticism of the House bill, some senators say this should be taken one step at a time. First, a clean repeal of the Affordable Care Act, followed by a well-thought-out replacement.
All right, Trace, thank you. So here now, Governor Mike Huckabee, Fox News contributor, and Austin Goolsbee, former advisor to President Obama and a professor at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you here. So Trace laid it out well. Governor Huckabee, let me start with you. Is this a bill that will improve the situation for people who do not like Obamacare?
It will for some of them, Martha, but look, let's be real clear, and I want to be very honest with you and with everybody who's watching. This is not a wonderful panacea. There are going to be some people who right now have health care who may not be able to afford the new version because we don't know what the market is going to be. The fact that there are elimination of the mandate, both individually and also the coverage benefit, that's a good thing because those were unconstitutional. But it's also what made it financially feasible. I think the Republicans are playing a little bit of a word game when they say we're going to end subsidies, but then we're going to come on the back end with tax credits. Here's the problem. If you're a poor person, you don't need a tax credit because you can't wait for a year to get your money. You need the money now so you can afford the health care. And I think that's a little bit misleading to say that, golly, we've done this wonderful thing by ending the subsidies like it's a fiscal error of responsibility. But the truth is you're still subsidizing it. You're just doing it in a way that poor people can't afford it.
All right. So, I mean, here's the problem for President Trump. He's in the middle here to some extent because this is what he promised. Let's play that.
Save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Have to do it. Get rid of the fraud, get rid of the waste and abuse, but save it.
All right, so there's a couple things here. One is that he's being pulled in one direction by Rand Paul, the more conservative wing of the party, and the other direction by Paul Ryan, who's saying, look, let's get something done. Let's put something on your desk that we can sign and get this ball rolling. Austin, what do you think?
Look, I think what you said is correct. I thought that what the governor said was well thought through, and I think in the White House they're looking at this. They're trying to decide, is this a Chernobyl-style meltdown or merely a Fukushima? They are trying to get their name off of this. They want to have nothing to do with it. Number one, it's a direct violation of one of the central promises that Donald Trump made when he was campaigning, that he would not cut Medicaid, and it's an $880 billion cut to Medicaid. And then second, you pile on that the CBO score says 24 million people are going to lose their health insurance or not have health insurance, however you want to phrase it.
You know, some people think that's true. Some people think that's not true. Some people think CBO is so politicized that you can't trust what they say. They were way off on Obamacare, as you know, Austin, and a lot of people believe that their numbers are way off here as well.
Be careful, Martha, because the White House has their own internal numbers, and the White House's own numbers were actually worse than what the CBO said. So I think the fact that every Democrat and something like half the Republicans are expressing major reservations about this bill.
Part of the problem is once you give people something, it's almost impossible to take it away. We know that. And the other thing that strikes me in that soundbite that we just played from President Trump, Governor Huckabee, is to look for the waste in Medicaid and Medicare, right? President Obama said the exact same thing. It never happened, and I don't know if it ever will. We will see. Your thoughts?
Well, one of the reasons we don't really fix Medicaid is because we don't make it realistic. Turn Medicaid over to the states, make it a block grant, but give the governors the flexibility to do co-pays, deductibles, and premiums. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to be able to sustain the cost because you don't control the utilization. Why would a person go to the doctor tomorrow if he can go to the emergency room right now at 10 o'clock at night and still not pay anything? But make the difference of $10 versus a $100 payment. Now you've got a reason that you're going to control utilization. Some of this is common sense.
I'm sorry. I got to jump in. Is this going to pass, do you think, Governor? Going to get this through?
I don't think the current form will pass exactly like this, but that's typical of legislation. Everybody takes their spoon into the kitchen. Everyone wants to be a chef. And a lot of people will get to add some spice before the recipe's finished.
Nicely put. Gentlemen, thank you. Good to see you as always. So still ahead tonight, the actress Ashley Judd is triggered at a basketball game after she simply met, a supporter of President Trump. Dana Lash here with her message on that. Plus, free speech on college campuses in the age of Trump is approaching crisis level. A fallout continues from a recent incident at Middlebury College that left an invited speaker mobbed and a professor hospitalized. Former Education Secretary Bill Bennett here with his thoughts on that tonight. He calls the adults in charge at these universities feckless, and he has a prescription for fixing the problem. That's next. Developing tonight, the Middlebury College protest on March 2nd that silenced an invited speaker, well-known writer Charles Murray, and also sent to the hospital the popular professor whom he was speaking with that night, has continued to get national attention. The controversy setting off a larger conversation about free speech on American college campuses. A student from Middlebury wrote this: "For many self-proclaimed liberals who pride themselves on openness and tolerance, it is a shame how they readily exclude and judge harshly those with opposing views. Indoctrination and alienation are not the ways to introduce more progressive ideals to conservatives. Open conversation and listening is. That's from Carter Massengill, who has tried in vain up to this point to get an editorial that is part of published in the Middlebury newspaper. Apparently, the folks who run the newspaper haven't been interested in that viewpoint, but perhaps they'll change their mind. Joining me now, Bill Bennett, former education secretary and host of The Bill Bennett Show, podcast on iTunes, and a Fox News contributor. Bill, good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
This young man wrote this letter to me. He has tried very hard to get his perspective heard by some and read by the student body in the newspaper, but so far it hasn't happened. He thinks it may happen now. Your thoughts on all this?
Is he a student at Middlebury?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Is he alive? Is he alive? Is he okay? Has anybody checked on him?
He's fine. Yes, he's fine.
I mean,
and very strong and brave, I would say, in the face of all this. Yeah.
Yes, for telling the truth, you get a medal at Middlebury. He's probably a transfer from a community college or someplace that makes sense. Look, maybe this is the end point. Some very smart people have written this is the end point, the tipping point. I don't think so. There's no end to the nonsense on college campuses. The real embarrassment here is, of course, not just the students. I mean, you can send your child to Middlebury, where he can hang out with idiots such as those in the who were screaming and preventing free speech, or maybe if he takes it real seriously, he can become an idiot himself. And you can do that for $62,000 a year and rank number 4 in U.S. News and World Report. It's just ridiculous. The president of the college stood up there and talked about, well, the students were screaming and not letting Murray speak. He's a brilliant man, one of the most brilliant people in America. Wouldn't let him speak. She was talking about how much she disagreed with him. But I'll tell you what tops it all off, Martha. There was a letter that was published on this. Did you read the New York Times by the woman professor whose neck was injured and whose hair was pulled? Mm-hmm. She wrote in the New York Times on Monday. You know who she blamed? Donald Trump. Yeah. You bet. Anyway, that's where we go in the land of milk and maple syrup.
Yeah. There's also been something put out by the college saying that they wanted to let people know useful information regarding Charles Murray's Middlebury visit. It was from the admissions folks, and they wanted to make it very clear. They went to pains to put as much distance as possible between themselves, between the college and the speaker. They said, well, we didn't hire Charles Murray. We didn't ask him to come. It was a student group, and we don't ascribe to any of his views. I mean, enlighten everybody at home. What is so controversial about Charles Murray?
Well, of course, they got it wrong. They call him a white nationalist. Charles is one of the most open-minded, liberal-minded people in the world. They're attacking the bell curve, which talks about cognitive stratification. Most of the book, if they would read it, do they read books there? Is about how we now select people based on intellect rather than by caste or religion or color of their skin, which is progress for civilization. I wonder how many of them read the book. But this happens all the time. I haven't been invited to a college campus like this in forever. I had 32 honorary degrees, Martha, before I joined the Reagan administration. After that, I got 4, I think, in 30 years. I've been told that my views are not welcome on a campus. I've been told that, free speech does not apply to people who disagree with what the faculty is talking about. It's horrendous. And the real embarrassment here is that people pay $62,000 a year for it, for their kids, thinking, well, they'll get this prestigious degree. Not that prestigious degree, by the way.
Well, you know what? The biggest travesty is that they're not being educated, that they're not hearing different viewpoints in order to develop their own opinion. They're basically being brainwashed because they're only hearing one side of the story, and they have to wait till they get out of college to start opening their mind and hearing different viewpoints. So, Bill Bennett, thank you very much, sir. We're going to continue on this story. We'll have you back soon. Good to see you. So a big first for the Trump administration as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson lands in Tokyo, Japan in just hours, tasked with projecting American strength in the region. Analysts say is reaching a boiling point. General Jack Keane joins us in moments with what is really at stake with this important visit and the changes under Donald Trump, the president, in his military. Plus reaction tonight to major moves by the administration to take on the allegedly unaccountable federal bureaucracy. We are seeing the deconstruction of the administrative state. Are we? We'll get there when we come back. State Rex Tillerson is just hours from touching down in Tokyo, Japan, the first stop on his highly anticipated trip to Asia. The visit comes as many experts say the region is as complex and dangerous as it has ever been. The Wall Street Journal noting the stakes with one country in particular of utmost importance with a headline that went this way: to China, America finally looks vulnerable. On top of that, Mr. Tillerson's stop in Tokyo comes just a week after North Korean missiles came dangerously close to the Japan coastline. Rich Edson traveling with the Secretary of State and reporting tonight from Tokyo. Rich.
Martha, in just a few hours, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson arrives here to Tokyo, Japan. It's the first city on a three-stop Asian tour that will also take him to Seoul, South Korea, and Beijing, China. Atop Secretary Tillerson's agenda will be coordinating efforts to address North Korean aggression, specifically the continued development of its ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs. To counter that, the United States is engaging in ongoing military exercises with South Korea and also agreed to deploy drones and a missile defense system to South Korea. The Chinese government views that as a threat. The United States denies that and says it is only installing those systems to defend South Korea from its northern neighbor.
We differ in our viewpoints on the way forward, but in no way are we going to back away from our treaty obligations to our allies, South Korea, in doing the utmost that we can do for not only the defense of our forces, but for the defense of the Korean people.
There's also a significant economic component to this trip, as President Trump has promised to remake the trade dynamic with Asia. He's already done so substantially, withdrawing the United States from the 12-country Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade agreement that Japan was also negotiating to be a part of. Among his first meetings here in Tokyo, Secretary Tillerson will be meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Martha?
Thank you, Rich. So joining me now with more, General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News military analyst. Jack, good to see you. Good evening. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you, Martha.
Big trip, obviously, for Rex Tillerson. A number of people have been in this position before. He is new to the job and the former CEO of ExxonMobil. He will speak with leaders in Japan and in China. What should be at the top of his list?
Well, clearly, North Korean aggression is the number one subject. We've had 20 years of three presidents trying to leverage China to change North Korea's behavior. The result, they have a nuclear arsenal, and to develop medium-range ballistic missiles and intercontinental missiles that they intend to weaponize with nuclear weapons. That is highly dangerous to the security of the United States. It puts our bases in the region at risk, and it puts the American people at risk. That is totally unacceptable. What Tillerson will be telling the Chinese is that you're coming down with North Korea to a military option only, that we will have no other choice but to conduct some type of strike, kinetic, cyber attack, both on those launch facilities so they do not launch those weapons. That is what is in front of us.
Is that a move that you think President Trump will make?
Absolutely. I cannot imagine a president of the United States accepting a weaponized ICBM launched from an aggressor nation like North Korea. We cannot put the American people at risk.
You know, it's fascinating to see the posture changing in terms of the Trump administration and the way they're going about things. Of course, you know, many people disagree with some of these moves. And in terms of the ability of our military to do on the ground what they feel they need to do. Big story in the New York Times the other day that he's loosening their ability to go after terrorists and to hit targets in places like Yemen and Somalia. Is that a big change, and is it a change that you believe is necessary?
It is a big change, and it's absolutely necessary. Listen, we've had three former secretaries of defense, Hagel, Panetta, and Gates, all complain about the Obama administration micromanaging military operations, so much so that the enemy adapted to it, and we weren't flexible enough to react to an enemy in time. Now what the president has done, he's reestablished trust with civilian leaders who are overseeing the military and the military commanders themselves. They give us the intent, the military commanders. This is what we're trying to accomplish. You go out and accomplish that, and you do not have to ask permission for every airstrike you want to conduct or every operation you want to conduct. That is the way it should work. And finally, this president is putting that back in play the way it needs to be.
So you believe he's listening to the military commanders in the field and doing what they say. In terms of, sort of the diplomacy, that Rex Tillerson will need to address here, Russia has tried to supplant us in many ways in these arenas. They're selling equipment, selling fighter jets to these countries where we used to be the dominant supplier of them. In many ways, they don't need us anymore, and perhaps that is what drove some of that headline. China sees America now for the first time as truly vulnerable.
Well, the Chinese have been trampling on U.S. interests and the interests of our allies in the South China Sea, in the Western Pacific for the last 8 years, and they have literally had their way, so much so that our allies are very concerned. Russia in the Middle East has been trying and succeeding at replacing the United States as the most influential country in that region. Arms deals, nuclear power plants, you name it, they've been doing it. This is what is happening.
Thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight, sir. Good to see you.
Good talking to you, Martha.
So still ahead, Ashley Judd left shaken after encountering a Trump supporter face-to-face at a basketball game. Dana Lash is here with her response to the actress's call for increased safe spaces to prevent these sorts of things from happening. Plus, President Trump's executive order calls for cutting spending and staffing at federal agencies. Can you imagine? Are we seeing what Steve Bannon called the destruction of the administrative state? Molly Hemingway and Matt.
Deconstruction of the administrative state. You look at these cabinet appointees, they were selected for a reason, and that is the deconstruction. The way the progressive left runs is if they can't get it passed, they're just going to put it in some sort of regulation in an agency. That's all going to be deconstructed.
That was President Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, speaking last month at CPAC. He's describing one of the main objectives of this administration. And boy, does it have folks in the U.S. bureaucracy uneasy. Yesterday, while the media focused a lot on Russia and other healthcare stories, the president chipped away at that administrative state, signing an executive order that required a review of every federal agency to look for cuts. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, Matt Bennett, former deputy assistant to President Bill Clinton and co-founder of The Third Way. So this is war. This is battle with the bureaucracy that lives within the beltway of D.C., and they are not happy about it, Molly.
Well, I hope that this is war. I hope that the Trump administration understands the need to take on the size and scope of our bureaucracy, which has so much power, so many regulations, a really big problem with lack of transparency and lack of accountability. I mean, I think people understand, just looking at the past few years, we have an IRS that's able to target political opponents with impunity. We have a Veterans Affairs Administration that has systematic incompetence that has led to the death of Americans, and nobody has lost their job. We have serious problems with the bureaucracy, and it will require not just executive orders like what we saw yesterday, but the fortitude to really see that through to the end, to deal with the waste, the fraud, the mismanagement, and again, just the tremendous control and power that the bureaucracy has over average Americans' lives.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very big story, and it goes to the heart of simple questions like, can you make a 20% cut in your agency? And I think there's reason, Matt, why Steve Bannon said this cabinet was selected quite intentionally. The last cabinets have been accused of not having anybody from the business world. A lot of these folks are from the business world, and they understand what it means when a CEO says, you know what, I got to take 10% out of your group, find a way.
Well, look, Martha, that's true, but don't forget where we are. This is after many years of budget sequestration, which has meant their budgets have been cut pretty radically down.
The defense budget has been cut pretty radically, nothing else.
No, it was all non-defense budgets were cut other than the entitlement programs. So the programs have been cut really deeply already for many years, and now this is going to go below the bone and into real muscle.
How can that possibly be, Matt? We have more tax dollars going into the U.S. government than ever before. You look at education, in many of the most difficult areas for education, you have a higher dollar amount going towards each student than ever before. So the problem is not money. The problem is efficiency. And that is what he's trying to get at the heart of here. Now, whether or not he's going to succeed, I have no idea, because the forces pushing back against this are going to be tremendous.
But, Martha, don't forget what we're talking about. We're talking about keeping our drinking water safe. We're talking about keeping our skies and airports safe. We're talking about protecting wildlands. We're talking about doing things that people really, really care about. And yes, we are spending more money, but we're a bigger country. We have 330 million people in this country. It takes money to do
Molly, those are
things we need
scary
to do.
things. Is that what we're talking about?
No, and I mean, we saw 20,000 pages added to the Federal Register last year, hundreds of new regulations, thousands of new regulations, including some that are significant with economic impact. You see that federal agencies grow in a way that's correlated with the size of regulatory growth. And this has tremendous economic impact, but more than that, it has impact on the freedom of Americans to live their lives how they choose, to have jobs that they choose to have, to raise their families how they want to have things in their refrigerator that they want to. And yes, there is a role for limited regulation. We blew past that a long time ago.
We got to leave it there, but we're going to keep going on this, and we're going to have you both back. Thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight. So just ahead, actress Ashley Judd has a run-in with a Trump supporter that left her calling for apolitical spaces. She believes that they need to exist in this country. Dana Lash, up next.
I didn't know devils could be resurrected, but I feel Hitler in these streets. A mustache traded for a toupee.